Hi everyone, welcome back to the second chapter. So today I want to talk about my personal top tips for learning Spanish. After 20 years living here, every single day I see people that either simply give up or just say it's too hard to learn. Now, I'm not talking about Spanish where you know just enough to order a glass of wine or to order a beer. I'm talking about really talking Spanish, enough Spanish so you can integrate, get things done, and truly feel part of the country. In this vlog, I'm going to share the mistakes that I've made along my journey of learning Spanish so you don't have to go through them yourself. Okay, tip number one, and for me, I think this is probably the singular most important, and that is don't compare Spanish to English, because Spanish has its own logic, it has its own rhythm. And when I first come to this country, I just kept thinking, why doesn't Spanish work like English? And the simple truth is, it doesn't, and it doesn't need to. So if you continue to translate everything to English in your head and to compare why it's done this way or that way, why is everything masculine or feminine and why are words backwards compared to English, etc. All that is going to do is seriously slow you down. The faster that you stop translating everything in your head, the faster that you actually start thinking in Spanish. So it's almost like training your brain to dance to a new beat instead of just simply marching along to an English drum. I'll give you an example, just as an anecdote. I remember when I was trying to understand the verbs in Spanish, and I remember thinking that these just make no sense. But once I accepted it's how Spanish is, things then started to click for me. Tip number 2 is read the Spanish newspapers or read a Spanish magazine. This is something that I used to do every single day when I arrived 20 years ago in Santiago de Compostela. Yes, it is very tedious, but it is a surefire way to start understanding even the way that the words are constructed, the way they're put together. So my advice is get a newspaper, a Spanish newspaper, a Spanish magazine. Get an English to Spanish dictionary. And even though it's going to take you 20 minutes, half an hour to translate a paragraph like this, every single day doing this and repeating this will speed up your understanding of the language so much quicker. Okay, tip number 3 is the fast track tip. And that is simply spend time with Spanish people. Learning alone at home is fine, but nothing accelerates your progress like immersion, listening, trying to speak, making mistakes. It is scary at first, but it's how you really start thinking in Spanish. So I'll give you an example. When I first moved to Spain 20 years ago, I lived in Santiago de Compostela. I was living with a Spanish girlfriend. All of the people in her group, her friends, boyfriends, husbands, didn't speak a word of English. I was going out with this group 2 or 3 times per week. I was partying on the weekend with them. And I'm going to be honest, it was very difficult. I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. I could either be completely ignorant to it and not actually fully enjoy my time with them, or I could try and be part of this group by learning their language. So that's what I did. So the more time you can spend with Spanish people, the quicker that you will start to speak the language. Now, of course, I understand not everybody's got a Spanish partner, and I get that. That will certainly slow you down. But look on Facebook. There's plenty of groups, regardless of whether you're currently living in Spain or maybe you're in your own country. There will be Spanish speakers there. So look for these Facebook groups, because I'm sure locally to where you live, you will be able to do conversation exchange. You'll be able to maybe do an hour of English, teaching a Spaniard English, and at the same time, they will then spend an hour teaching you Spanish. This is a great way to learn. It's something I did, for example, when I was living in Italy and I wanted to learn Italian. I done just that. But for sure, 100%, this is another great way to spend as much time as you can with a native Spanish speaker. Okay, tip number 4 is write in Spanish. Now, I'm going to give you an example. I'm not a person who sits and writes letters and stuff like that, but I am a person who writes notes to myself all the time. I need to pick this up from the shops. I need to pay this insurance. I need to go and see this person about this issue. Whatever it may be, write your notes in Spanish, because this is something that I found super helped me, and it really did. And it takes minutes to do it. But by simply writing, and the notes that you're writing, you're writing different notes all the time. Not only is that helping your thinking in Spanish, but it's also helping your writing skills in Spanish. So this was a big tip. It doesn't take long each day, but if you can get in the habit of doing that, I think it will help, because it certainly helped me. Tip number 5 is watch children's cartoons. I know it sounds silly, but they're simple, they're repetitive, and they're very clear. And what I found is that your brain picks up patterns, pronunciations, and basic vocabulary, often without even realising it. Plus, of course, they're fun. But yeah, kids' cartoons. I even remember my partner at the time buying me kids' books. Like books where there's a picture of a bus, there's a picture of an apple, there's a picture of a school teacher, all of these things. I know it sounds really silly for an adult to be learning this way, but it super works. Tip number 6 is simply forget English. Forget it. Watch your television in Spanish, listen to Spanish radio, watch Spanish movies. Now, what is important, this is the trick. Do not have the subtitles on. Having the subtitles on is, for me, I think, the worst thing you can possibly do, because your brain focuses more on reading the subtitles instead of actually listening. And even if you only understand half of what's going on because you haven't got the subtitles on, your ear starts training itself to recognize certain words and certain rhythm. So, as an example, I remember watching Spanish comedy for the very first time, and I understood almost nothing at first. But 2 weeks later down the line, I could start to follow odd parts of jokes, and that feeling of comprehension is quite addictive. Tip number 7 is listen to Spanish music. Now, at the time when I was learning, there was an artist called Mala Rodriguez, and for me, she was my go-to. I would play her songs over and over again. Her rhythm, her words, they stuck in my head. And what you will also find is that music helps your pronunciation, your vocabulary, and your listening skills all at the very same time. So sing along if you dare as well, because that's something that I used to do. And a lot of the time I wouldn't actually know the words that were being said, but again, it was a good way to practice pronunciation and just that repetitive rhythm. So that's another great tip. Tip number 8 is listen to Spanish radio. I found this really helpful because I was able to pick up different accents, different dialects, different speeds, and even different slang that's used in Spain. And I also found that this is a great way because it kind of breaks down your learning into bite-sized chunks. So find yourself a little routine, whether it's getting up in the morning and listening to Spanish radio, or having Spanish radio on in your car if you're already living in Spain, whatever it may be. But it's a really great way. And I found that over months of repeating this and listening to as much Spanish news on the radio, or even I was listening to Spanish football commentary, I found that super helpful. But one thing's for sure, my comprehension skyrocketed in a short period of time, just simply by listening to radio. Tip number 9, and this is a really important one as well, and that is to learn the verbs before you learn anything else. Now, when I started learning Spanish, I thought I was doing great because I'd learned hundreds, if not thousands, of single words. I'd learned the word for floor, ceiling, table, chair, car, sun, rain, time, weather, whatever it may be. And as great as that was to have all these amounts of words in my vocabulary, I couldn't actually use them because I didn't have the verbs to put together with them. So this is a massive tip. Forget the single words. Learn the verbs first, because without the verbs, everything else is absolutely useless. Okay, and tip 10 is pretty self-explanatory, but that is simply just try, speak, write, mess up, but don't be afraid. Mistakes are how you learn, and the more you try, the faster you will improve. It's as simple as that. And even if you think you sound ridiculous, just keep going, because this is the only way that Spanish will stop sounding foreign and start feeling natural. So look, I know Spanish is something that you'd all love to be able to speak, and I have spoken to people on my channel before that are still living in the UK but are moving over in the next year or two that have already started to immerse themselves into the language. And this is a really great thing to hear, because I, as an Englishman, do get embarrassed sometimes because there's so many people I know here that have been here for 20, 30 years and literally know a handful of words. So don't be one of those people, but certainly at the same time, don't be afraid to fail, because this is how you're going to learn. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this vlog, please remember to give it a like. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It's absolutely free to do. It doesn't cost a penny, but it really helps this small channel to continue to grow. Anyway, enjoy whatever you're doing for the rest of the day, and I'll catch you in the next one.